And I'm with the Greater Ohio Policy Center in Columbus, Ohio. For those of you that don't know us, we are a research and advocacy nonprofit working toward a vision of a revitalized Ohio. Today, we're hosting the second webinar in a 4-part webinar series entitled Keeping People in Their Homes, which focuses on strategies for neighborhood stability, particularly during the time of COVID. Greater Ohio Policy Center has organized this series in partnership with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. So today and for the next 2 Tuesdays at 1 o'clock, we'll be running this webinar series. As I've mentioned, each webinar addresses themes of neighborhood stability, but focuses on strategies different actors can implement. So last week, we looked at how philanthropy is responding to COVID. Today, we're going to talk about mission-driven developers. And in the coming weeks, we'll focus on local governments and nonprofit community advocates. Today's webinar is entitled Pivots Mission-Driven Developers Can Make to Promote Stability During COVID-19. And it will focus on the ways that developers are adjusting their work to be more responsive to community needs during COVID. Before we get started and I introduce our moderator today, I want to buzz through a few housekeeping items. First of all, we've reserved 3 to 4 minutes after each presentation for questions. So please feel free to post any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll see that they get to the panelists. We also want to recommend that you watch this webinar in speaker view. That way you'll have the fewest distractions throughout the program. And finally, we are recording this webinar. So if you would like to find the recorded version, we hope to post that on our website later this week. You can find it at greaterohio.org. Okay, with that, I am happy to get us started and introduce today's moderator, Sheldon K Johnson. Sheldon is the Vice President of Community Development at Community Building Partners, which is an enterprise of Praxia Partners. Sheldon oversees capacity building projects with community organizations to guide them in building strategy, designing affordable housing projects, and implementing strategic plans. Sheldon emphasizes racial equity and social determinants of health in all of his projects. He is currently working with the Dayspring Christian Community Development Corporation on a single-family initiative on the northeast side of Columbus, Ohio. Sheldon is also a former staff member of Greater Ohio, and he currently sits on our board. We're very happy to have him here today moderating. Welcome, Sheldon.
Well, thank you, Erica. It's a pleasure to be here and support this great work that Greater Ohio Policy Center and the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy are doing. I'm very excited about this panel. We have some great panelists. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. So it's my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, my friend, Jonathan Welty. So John Welty is the Executive Vice President at the Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing, OCCH, in Columbus. OCCH is a nonprofit financial intermediary based in Columbus that works with public and private developers to create affordable housing opportunities using the low-income housing tax credit program. Mr. Welty is the investor relations contact for OCCH, and he is also the president of the Ohio Capital Finance Corporation, a certified community development financial institution. John and OCFC have been integral in Columbus, Ohio Southside Renaissance Fund, a partnership with Nationwide Children's Hospital to create a $20 million loan fund for financing community development projects and the acquisition, construction, and permanent financing of affordable single-family and multi-family rental housing in the Southside Columbus neighborhoods. We're very happy to have John here today to tell us more about this effort and the other creative ways that his project team is responding to COVID. So welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Sheldon. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to acknowledge Greater Ohio and their fine work. We've done a lot of work with them over the years, and look forward to many more exciting times together. Did want to spend a little bit of time today speaking about some of the ways that we've pivoted, both as a low-income housing tax credit syndicator as well as a lender within the community development space in regarding to affordable housing. If we want to move to the next slide, we could. Ohio Capital Finance Corporation is the subsidiary or affiliate of Ohio Capital Corporation for Housing. OCCH is a primary syndicator, and Ohio Capital Finance Corp, OCFC, is a lender. So we've had a broad perspective in terms of kind of seeing where the market has been and what's been going on, particularly this past year as it relates to COVID. And on the following slide, just to give you a kind of a point of context, Ohio Capital Corporation, we've done a little over $5 billion of affordable housing in terms of equity investment. And on the following slide, then OCFC itself has also been a very active lender in the affordable housing space. So very pleased with that work and our mission of being a flexible and resource for developers, lenders, investors, service providers, management companies across our portfolio. So we could move over to slide 4, or the next slide. How about? I'm sorry. And yeah, so as we look at the pivots, we're talking about pivoting here and how much we've done, what we've done. And a big piece of that has been the pandemic came out and we responded with what we called the REEF, the Resident Emergency Impact Fund. This was a $1.8 million collaboration, $1 million of Ohio Capital funding, as well as leveraged by $800,000 of our investor capital through grants. Looking to say, hey, we know that there is a tidal wave coming. We believe residents are not going to have resources necessary to pay their rent, and we created this fund back in April to do that. Happy to say that the fund has not been heavily utilized because of the great federal resources that have come in, staying off foreclosures and evictions. That being said, we are prepared for the day when some of that begins to end, and our residents will be in need of cash to help make their rent payments and stay in place. So very pleased with that effort. Another thing that's come about are just concerns from our investor community. They have a lot of capital invested in the low-income housing tax credit projects that we're invested in. And one thing that we did early on was create a communication vehicle via a monthly update, really looking at all aspects of the business, from service providers to delivery, cash flow, occupancy, et cetera, and to provide that communication tool back to our investor community so that they're aware of kind of the issues, the things that we're seeing in the marketplace, and that they can also feel secure that their investments are being safeguarded. One thing that came out of the work with our investors specifically was how are we reacting to construction during COVID, knowing that we will have time delays, we will have cost overruns, we're all expected. And then making a shift in terms of on the construction side, something that has been done in the past where we would do a rehabilitation around residents, where the residents might stay in their unit, they'd move out during the day, we'd be able to do some rehabilitation and come back, and they would come back in the evening. That type of a rehab is no longer safe. It wasn't safe in April and May. So, beginning to shift and pivot in terms of how we think about what does construction look like, how we bring in subs. Maybe we might have an electrical contractor on one floor while the plumbing contractor is on another floor. So making a lot of shifts in the construction scheduling, and then being able to continue that communication going back up to our investors and our partners. As we look on the following slide, the pivots that Ohio Capital Finance Corporation has made, we've done a lot there. Early on, I think like everybody, we expected a large amount of deferrals and issues coming up, modifications. And while we were there and ready to react and provide those modifications, we didn't see the need that we thought we would. That being said, we did provide that flexibility to a handful of developers to make sure that the projects that they were working on could continue, and we could make arrangements for those payments. One additional item that we've seen a lot of is through our community development work here in Columbus, Ohio, is just the digital divide. It's having a huge impact in terms of digital literacy, where families can get you can get resources. It used to be you'd be able to go to the library or the local restaurant to be able to hop on the free Wi-Fi. But without that, as COVID hit, the digital divide became much greater. We've worked with a number of different partners to help smooth that out. CareSource, a large managed care organization in Dayton, has provided us with a significant grant to help bridge that digital divide, being able to provide iPads to some of our senior facilities so that seniors can engage in telehealth, knowing that they're not able to get on the bus or get to the doctor medical appointments. So grateful to that, as well as just the education component of that, and how can we begin to look at the digital literacy, not just financial literacy, which has always been the case, but trying to teach and grow the digital literacy piece through OCFC as well. And then additionally, just being flexible in terms of our lending environment, We did reallocate funding from a capital grant that we had to providing dollars for rental assistance, as well as food assistance. So on the following slide, part of the introduction, the Southside and Renaissance Fund, we're the operator of. We did make some pivots there. This is an initiative with a large anchor institution, Nationwide Children's Hospital, and a couple of community development corporations that are highly functioning. But knowing that that work needed to continue, we also wanted to provide the flexibility back to the developer and the management company so that residents were not at risk of being evicted, but we can still continue the work of rehabilitating housing within the south side of Columbus. So again, the theme there, looking at communication, working with the residents, meeting the residents where they are with regard to their own specific timeframes. Then on the following slide, as we look at service providers, this is a big component of our work, not directly, but indirectly through the entities that are providing services back to residents within our affordable housing projects. The big key here is really looking at those partnerships and how can we begin to leverage and link up partnerships. As I mentioned earlier, really meeting people where they are, knowing that you can't meet the person today, but how can we, combine different opportunities? So going back in time, we might have had a holiday food drive, and you'd also have a gift exchange, or bring gifts in to distribute out. All that was now done into a one-stop shop. So it was a drive-through activity. So all of those resources that a resident might need during the holiday season, it was simply a drive-through, kind of a touchless activity, but still the communication was there, and being able to serve the residents. So as we look at that, we were able to put USB drives with access to materials, also some print materials. So that all that was going into that communication piece to be able to continue to communicate with residents and the local community. Another thing, of course, is we've all done and we're doing today is going via Zoom. So there's been an education component there, bringing people along, teaching them how to use Zoom, how to use FaceTime, so that we can continue to ensure the services are being provided. Finally, doing a lot of wellness checks and just continuing that communication with residents, because that's been a huge need, particularly with the elderly folks that are not able to get out during the pandemic. Then as we look at management companies, unfortunately, we have seen an increase in domestic violence. That's both within the household and within the neighbors. You've got a number of people that are on their own sites. So trying to work through that, we've gone with virtual mediation, working with neighbors, again, pivoting from what might have been an in-person interaction to digital, as well as staying vigilant on mental health issues as those are occurring more frequently. And then also just on-site crime, unfortunately, has been occurring because we do have, people are now at the property more than they are at a job potentially. So this has brought on a really kind of an openness to talk, an openness for that communication piece, which has been really nice. A different type of communication that our managers might not have had historically, but knowing that people are in the same situation, being able to discuss their hardship and then how can we assist them. Another pivot that we've made, Ohio Capital operates a training academy. Last year we did 2,000 trainings, and this year, we typically do 2,000 trainings, and last year we increased that up to 3,500 trainings because we've gone virtual, and it's now on an on-demand basis. So shifted the programming there in the curriculum so that we can teach people how to conduct virtual tours, how to create a QR code so that a resident could scan something to be able to facilitate a maintenance request or other items. So I was looking at just paperwork, the traditional things that you need to do when you're leasing a unit, but doing those all virtual. So all told, some of the lessons learned on the last piece here before we wrap up is really staying flexible and staying aware, listening. People are engaged and they have a story to tell, and making sure that we can listen to that, we can communicate that story and their needs back up through our local partners, be it through investors, through lenders, through service providers, and being able to continue the linkages that they need, that our residents need to stay in place, as well as to keep the investor community informed of what's going on in the marketplace so they can feel secure that their investments are being well taken care of. So I appreciate the time today. And I'll just close with one final slide. I got it 1 second. This is just an interesting project that we did in kind of close to the south side, What the Waffle. It's a small minority business that we're really excited about. And while the business began in concept well before COVID, it actually came online during COVID. And it's been a great success story in terms of what that's been able to do for the community and for the workers that are employed at What the Waffle as a minority-owned business in a social enterprise. So it's been really great to kind of see how that whole effort has moved forward despite COVID.
That's really great, John. Thank you for that thoughtful presentation. Got a couple questions here for you. And just as a reminder for the attendees, we're going to take a few minutes to ask questions directly after each presenter, and then we'll have some time at the end for questions. So keep them coming through the chat. I'll be collecting them, and we'll get through as many of them as we can. So John, you spoke a lot about, a lot of the pivots that you and your team have made. And of course, a lot of your work is interfacing with investors. So could you talk a bit about what advice would you give to developers who need to convince their investors about the need to make pivots like you're describing? What helps you make that case to get those changes approved for your projects?
That's a great question. It's really been I hate to go back and harp on the communication thing, but it's been the communication piece. Everybody's hungry for up-to-date and honest feedback. We all know that we're living in a new time, and there are new issues that are being addressed every day. And how are those kind of coming back through? So as we've gone back, working with our developers, we're funneling that information back up to the investor community and the lenders. They've all got reporting obligations as well. So the best that we can do and learn from the developers in terms of feedback and timely, as well as I think the other thing is if there's an issue coming, let's talk about that early on as opposed to holding off and hoping it goes away. The earlier that we can get involved, the more resources that can be brought to the table, and I think it's better off for everyone.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Here's another question from our attendees. So is OCFC working with land banks to address housing insecurity or others? If so, are those efforts designed to be short-term emergency, or are they more durable?
We are working with a land bank, specifically in terms of just gaining access to lots so that we can begin to build new affordable housing on those parcels. That's really that's our biggest piece that we're engaged in right now on the affordable housing lending side with the land bank here. And that's in conjunction with Healthy Homes and Nationwide Children's Hospital.
Great, thank you. So we're going to do one more question here for you, John, before we move on. Do you have any worries about, once the pandemic is over and, things return to, whatever the new normal will be? What are some of the things that might have changed that are going to be enduring that, might give you some type of concern or some things that you're preparing for?
I think the thing that we're on the cusp of is kind of the unemployment and the resident, and knowing that there are a number of residents that are unemployed that are behind on rent, and how can we be proactively ready to support them when that time comes? Our goal is certainly not to evict, but to support. And I think the resident emergency impact fund that we created is going to get utilized once a lot of the resources begin to end. Another thing that is continuing to shift every day is just the use of digital technology and going virtual. So we've done a lot of changes to date, just utilizing the technology that is here, Zoom, FaceTime, et cetera. But how is that going to impact residents going forward in terms of, do you need to come on site to actually take the tour? We can do that now virtually. We've created 3D tours, kind of bringing all that up to speed. So there's a huge amount of opportunity. Some that comes with training, but also just being prepared for what's going to be in the next new normal, being able to take care of the resident.
That's really great. Thank you for that, John. We're going to move forward to our next presenter, but again, attendees, John will be back at the end for questions. So keep them coming through the chat if you have any additional questions for him. But our next presenter is Rachel Hastings. Rachel is the executive director at Price Hill Will, a community development corporation in Cincinnati, Ohio, that's working to improve the quality of life in the Price Hill neighborhoods. Price Hill Will's programming supports community building, affordable homeownership through homesteading, commercial corridor redevelopment, and after-school programming for neighborhood youth. Under Rachel's leadership, Price Hill Will has recently completed the $10 million transformation of the former Price Hill Masonic Lodge into ARCO, a space for arts and community. Today, Rachel is here to speak with us about Price Hill Will's homesteading, our land installment contracts programming. She will discuss how it's working in Cincinnati and why this programming is a useful mechanism for preserving affordability, especially during COVID. Thank you for being here today, Rachel.
Thanks, Sheldon. So I wanted to welcome everybody this afternoon, and thanks for the host for organizing this. Yeah, Price Hill Will, we are a small community development corporation working in the 3 Price Hill neighborhoods in Cincinnati. We have about 40,000 residents in those neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods are actually the most racially, socioeconomically diverse neighborhoods in Cincinnati. Next slide, please. So this is a very different scale that, as a CDC that we work on versus Ohio Capital. So a lot of the work that we have taken on during COVID that's really sort of pivoted has been trying to maintain connections between neighbors during these tough times. You know, so many folks were at home, working with kids at home. We had a lot of essential workers in the neighborhood who continued to have to work despite health concerns. You know, we have a very high percentage of Black and Latino residents as well. And a lot of those folks are feeling sort of disconnected from broader conversations around COVID safety. So a lot of what we have done this year is to really help make sure that our residents are connected to one another and to us, and to maintain those trust levels so that we can make sure that our residents are getting access to services as needed. A couple of things that we did this year that I wanted to highlight was, like everyone, a lot of things moved online. So we spent a lot of time working to train residents in how to use Zoom. We did device drives. One of our neighborhoods, Lower Price Hill, actually has neighborhood Wi-Fi. The other 2 don't. And so it was trying to find ways to connect folks with Wi-Fi as much as possible. We did a new program this spring that was really lovely called Price Hill Grows Sunflowers, where we just bought a bunch of sunflower seeds, both mammoth ones like the 12-foot ones and little kind of pot-sized ones for apartment dwellers, and gave those out to everybody in the neighborhood and encouraged them to grow them. So for those of us that were spending a lot more time walking around the neighborhood this spring, you'd see these happy sunflowers, and it just sort of made everybody feel good and brought folks together. And then some of our ongoing programming that we work with residents for, like Let's Get Physical, which is free yoga classes for the neighborhood, that all either went online or went outside. During the summer, we do a creative community festival every year that was virtual. So trying to keep up all of the good energy to bring folks together, but do it in a very different sort of way. Next slide, please. We also created some other new programs that I was really excited about. We did a program this spring called Price Hill Porch Pics, where one of our staff members is an amazing photographer. And so she just took like porch pictures, like either graduation pictures or family photos of folks in the neighborhood. Again, a lot of our residents don't have access to quality camera equipment and photographers. So we took some photos and then shared printed copies with folks, because many folks don't have opportunities to get photos printed. And this is just a small selection. They're the happiest photos. And it was so heartwarming to see those, especially in April and May, when the pandemic was really starting to become a reality, and we were all really adjusting to this sort of disconnection. To see happy faces, and we shared that via social media. It just brought a lot of joy to folks. So we're really excited about that. And another thing we did, one of our biggest programs is called My Cincinnati. It's our youth orchestra program. Normally we have 130 kids every day after school at an old firehouse. That is clearly not possible during COVID. So My Cincinnati went entirely online this spring. And the amazing thing about My Cincinnati, it's based on a model called El Sistema out of Venezuela, is that it's not just about learning music and instruments for the kids. It's really about growing them into a future generation of leaders and providing support and connections for their families within the broader Price Hill neighborhood. So that has continued to be a really beautiful, safe space for our young people and their families. And we've done a lot of kind of referrals and service delivery that we hadn't done pre-COVID to our My Cincinnati families. Next slide, please. So Sheldon talked about our homesteading program, and this is a program that we're really excited about, and I think is a perfect fit for helping families during COVID. So for our homesteading program, we created a partnership, and it has, of course, us, Santa Maria Community Services, which is a nonprofit social services partner in the neighborhood, Legal Aid, working in neighborhoods, Catholic Charities, the Port, which is our land bank, and our local LISC office. And what we do for this partnership is that Price Hill Will acquires a vacant house in Price Hill, and we bring it up so that it meets building code, but we don't complete all of the cosmetic work. So we might not do some of the interior finish painting, we might not do landscaping. Maybe the bathroom vanity is structurally sound, but a little outdated. So we get the house ready, and then Santa Maria Community Services actually trains the families in how to, maintain a budget, keep, what it's like to become a homeowner. We also work with working in neighborhoods, and they do a little bit of homeownership preparedness training. After the family is qualified by Santa Maria and WIN, we actually get information about the family, about what part of the neighborhood they want to live in, how many bedrooms they need, and so forth. And then we match that family to the house. All of our families are below 65% of AMI, and they have lots and lots of varied backgrounds. We have a lot of immigrants, particularly from Guatemala and Mexico in our neighborhood, so we don't require a credit check, which is really great because we have a lot of families that don't actually have a credit history, at least not an American sort of credit history. So then we work with the family. We agree upon a scope of work that they need to complete in 5 years. And then we make sure that their housing payments are no more than 25% of their income. We sell the house on a land contract that Legal Aid wrote to that family. And over the course of 5 years, the family makes payments to Price Hill Well at 0% interest. They complete their scope of work. We continue to do home inspections and make sure that they're keeping up with what we agreed upon. And then at the end of 5 years, assuming that the family has made their improvements and made their payments, we transfer ownership of the house to them completely. So in 5 years, they own a house with no debt. And so what it really is it's an affordable housing program, but it's really geared towards helping these families rapidly build equity in the neighborhood. All of our families, except for one, have kids. So these are families that are already living in our neighborhood who have been renters and have been, have heavily rent burdened. And so for all of them, becoming a homeowner through homesteading is less expensive than it was to rent. It provides a safe place for their family to live. We have a lot of folks living in apartment buildings that are particularly scary during COVID. So this has provided a safe space for families to grow and a little bit of elbow room if folks are, working from home, learning from home. And it's just been amazing to see the amount of pride and excitement that our families have for their homes. They almost all go way above and beyond our agreed upon scope of work and do all this other amazing work. And it's really exciting to see. We this year during COVID, we did have a couple of families that were unemployed because of COVID. One of our families, it's a single mom of 8 kids, which first of all, in and of itself, she should get an award for having 8 kids and managing all that on her own. But, she was working at the local casino, which of course shut down. Then pretty quickly after that, she got a job working for Uber, just trying to make ends meet, and then she lost that. So we spent a lot of time connecting our homesteading families with assistance to help, cover their land contract payment and keep utilities on, all kind, free food access, all kinds of things. And a lot of these are services that some of our families have never had to take advantage of before. So it was a whole new world, sort of, guiding them through that process. I'm happy to say that as of now, all of our families are still in their homes. They're, keeping up their payments. We have been flexible with some of those folks as far as they're accepting late payments and so forth, but they are all still there, which we're really excited about. One other thing I'll share about homesteading, and then we'll move on to the next slide, is that this is a program that, again, it helps families build equity, and it's particularly for families that have been left out of the opportunity to build equity through other means. So, if you look at the demographics of our families, those families are not traditionally buying houses through conventional means, through the, traditional lending market. So we're seeing, new opportunities to build equity. I'll give you an example of one of our first families who's in the program. They bought their house. This was early on in the program where we were trying to sell everybody a house for $16,000 versus sort of sizing the land contract payment to their income. But this family bought a house for $16,000. They paid off their land contract within 2 years. And then we had a realtor do a broker's price opinion about a year later to give us the value of the house. And that realtor said that that homeowner or that home would have been valued at $106,000 if they were to list it. So that is an amazing opportunity for this family to build equity. They're not planning on flipping their house and moving out. They're committed to their neighborhood and want to stay, but that allows them a chance to, use that equity to send a kid to college or buy a car or something like that. So again, we're really sort of breaking that cycle of lack of equity for those families. So next slide, please. So one other new program that we created during COVID is called Do It Yourself Darlin. So this is actually started by our flute teacher of all things from my Cincinnati. And her name is Annie Darlin Gordon. So it's a home repair program for particularly geared for female household heads of household and low-income homeowners. And what Annie was doing is we pay her a stipend, and then we have grant dollars so that the families pay a reduced fee for some of the work that she does on their house. This is really key. We have a lot of emergency repair programs in Cincinnati and help with weatherization. But if you want to do an upgrade to improve the aesthetics of your house or just to make it more livable, that's really hard to come by. So Annie is both doing a home improvements. Here you can see some pictures. She added a half bath to one of our neighbors' houses so that her mother could come visit and not have to deal with all the stairs. Annie was able to do this on the basement space, so she wasn't in the same, living quarters with the family all the time. And it's helping build equity and helping keep our neighbors in the neighborhood. Longer term, we want to do more kind of home ownership repair classes for women with do-it-yourself Darlin contractors led by Annie. And that's something that we're looking forward to doing either later this year or early next year. So next slide, please. I think that's it. So thanks, everyone. I see a couple of questions. I don't know if Sheldon, if you want to gear them to me, or I can try to read them.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna feed a couple other ones
Okay,
to
good.
you that getting them coming different places. But thank you for that. Thank you for that, Rachel. So you spoke a bit about how the local land bank is one of your partners.
Yep.
Can you talk about how does the land bank partner with you on homesteading?
Sure. So we have gotten a couple of houses from the land bank. So when the land bank has properties that are available in Price Hill, they give us the addresses before they list them for sale, so we can take a look and see if it's a good fit for homesteading. For our homesteading program, we do have subsidies from local foundations and some local banks, and those subsidies stay in the houses long term. But we also, we're not doing a full gut rehab. So our scope of work is a little less. So, the reality is that a lot of the times by the time the land bank has gotten a property, it's so far gone that it's not really in our kind of hot point for rehabbing a house. So that doesn't work. But we have been able to find, by every 10 to 12 houses you go through that land bank owns, you might find that one gem that is a good fit for homesteading. They also are, for this next phase of homesteading that we're working on now, doing a little bit of stabilization work on a couple of properties, like putting on a new roof or something like that before they transfer it to us. So that's a great help.
Great, thank you for that. So again, speaking about homesteading, I was, be honest, being a part of this panel was really cool. I didn't know too much about homesteading. So if any of our attendees are like that, how can we determine whether or not homesteading would be a good fit for our community?
Well, the good news, I think, is that, our entire plan with homesteading has been to pilot this and see what works and what doesn't work. So we've been working on this for a couple of years now, and we found what really works in our neighborhood, and we were more than happy to share with other folks. Our goal is to pilot this, expand this to other neighborhoods. We are talking with other folks in other greater Cincinnati neighborhoods and a couple of other places in Ohio about how they can replicate this. I think it's really important to get good partners around the table. For us, it's really, really key, of course, knowing your neighborhood and your housing stock, having trust of your neighbors to do this, because to be honest, a land contract sounds scary, right? So many people get taken advantage of with land contracts. So that's why I always say, well, legal aid wrote our land contract. This is the real deal. This is something trustworthy. That's really important. But then also the social services component is really key to make sure that our families, we're working with very low income families, but they have the support and training with the social service agency partner, Santa Maria, and they can continue to rely upon that and our staff if there are any, bumps along the way. So those connections are really key, at the ground level. Again, I'm thankful that our local LISC office has been really supportive throughout the entire process.
That's really great. One more question for you, Rachel, before we move on. So you spoke about how serving some of your neighbors who don't have a credit history. So has there been any role that lenders have played in working with you to develop, credit history for neighbors and residents who've been in your program?
So we do have some local banks that are really, that can serve folks. Like if you don't have a social security number, you can still open up a bank account and so forth. And there, we used to have in Cincinnati the Bank On initiative, which was sort of helping folks who are unbanked become banked, but that isn't going on any longer, which is sad. I think, there's so much mistrust amongst a lot of our neighbors for any bit of the, participation in the banking industry, that's a really hard challenge to tackle, but I think it is happening bit by bit. We have a very small local savings and loan where a lot of their staff is bilingual, English and Spanish, and they are starting to help folks, open bank accounts and get some credit and so forth. But it's a large systemic problem that I think we still need to address more holistically.
That's great. Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Rachel. So once again, we're gonna keep sending questions for Rachel in the chat. She'll be back at the end when we have a few more minutes for questions. But we're gonna move on to our last presenter, who is Kim Kucher. Kim is the executive director of the Toledo office of the Local Initiative Support Corporation, LISC, which is a community development financial institution headquartered in New York. Since her tenure as LISC ED began in 2015, Kim has secured more than $87 million of investment to support comprehensive community development in the city, focused on narrowing the racial, health, wealth, and opportunity gaps. Recent projects include the $7.5 million mixed-use redevelopment of the former Wonder Bread factory in Toledo, a public-private partnership led by MBEWBE mission-driven developer. Today, Kim will discuss Toledo's Core City program, an important business and nonprofit partnership focused on closing the appraisal gap, eliminating blight, and increasing home ownership through home rehabilitation projects in Toledo. Thanks for being here, Kim. You're still muted, Kim.
Sorry, I thought I clicked that off. I just want to thank you, Sheldon, and Greater Ohio Policy for hosting this afternoon. So I'm going to talk about the LISC's Core City program. I don't know if you want to advance to the next slide. Sort of just going over how the program works, what successes we've achieved to date, and the key partners that we've had at the table that have been key instrumental in moving this program ahead. Next slide. So the Core City program, many communities are operating, and some we've heard today, rehab programs for addressing existing blighted single-family homes. We have focused that initiative in a targeted way, looking at neighborhoods where we have been working to address other affordable housing, other blighted homes through demolition and partnerships with the land bank and other community partners for the purpose of creating a significant visible difference in the community, so that we can help increase property values and neighborhood stability, particularly in neighborhoods of color. Next slide. The starting of this program really came about focusing on the single family housing stock that was built using the low-income housing tax credit, and recognizing that we needed comprehensive approaches that would sort of stem decades-long sort of disinvestment due to population loss, lags or declines in homeownership rates, and how that was affecting the property values in neighborhoods, which really created so many challenges, not for individuals and neighborhoods, just to access capital through banks, through home refis or home equity lines, but also for public sector and philanthropy dollars to be invested. So much of the case had been that the subsidy that was needed for so many of these homes continued to increase. And some of that was due obviously to declines in value and conditions that were continuing to decline in neighborhoods after deferred maintenance and so on would be left languish for some time. So we recognized that we needed to bring all of the various components together to really address a multi-pronged approach in target neighborhoods to really address these underlying conditions in neighborhoods. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about LIST's role in bringing the partners together. Who are some of the strategic partners that we've worked with in the target neighborhoods? What community development partners have been engaged in helping to renovate homes, and other trusted relationships that have been needed so that we can connect with homeowners and other residents in the community, and how that has helped preserve affordability and making sure that we have restrictive covenants in place, so that way there's an opportunity to protect. Next slide. Sorry. So to date, we've completed, the program launched in 2018, at the end of 2018, focusing on the core neighborhoods. To date, we've sold 15 homes, and you can see the red dots that represent the pipeline of homes. This map doesn't show all of the key institutions, but when we talk in a minute about the strategic partners that have been involved, you can see the museum. If this map was a little bit better, you might see ProMedica, Metro Parks, Mercy, Bon Secours, St. Vincent's campus. All of those anchor institutions have really played a key role in helping to support broader neighborhood strategies, the Core City program being one component of that investment strategy, where each one of our sort of Core City initiatives are focused. Next slide. To date, we've invested a little over $700,000, and that's allowed us, with partners with the Land Bank, NeighborWorks Toledo Region, the Historic South Initiative, all of these organizations, our community development partners, focused with us on addressing and improving housing conditions. They've been able to bring additional resources to help renovate these homes, and to the tune of about $740,000. Our Core City program is providing a $30,000 grant, and sometimes that alone isn't sufficient to address some of the housing conditions. So each of the partners that we've been working with as part of the program have been critical to bringing their own resources to the table and help sell homes, the 15 homes that we've sold to date, which on average have been about $48,000. When we started this initiative at the end of 2018, in the 4 neighborhoods that we've been focused, on average, much of the home ownership sales had been around $25,000. And so over the course of time, we've been able to increase the sales price, and that we feel is really important, not only to attract homeowners to the core neighborhoods that we're focusing, but to also protect legacy owners that have, been investing in neighborhoods for some time. Much of them have negative equity because of, or as a result of, some of the economic challenges that I referenced a few slides earlier. And so increasing the sales price is also helping to provide overall neighborhood stability, even for legacy owners. Next slide. So who's benefiting from this program? We were very intentional working with our partners early on to make sure that the community partners that we're working with and other support services like the financial opportunity centers have relationships with the community, bank partners, community lending officers, and other faith-based organizations that could help let the community know that there's an opportunity to attract new home buyers to the community, and working with the housing authority and all of the various partners that are at the table that are working with tenants. There's an opportunity to help support those tenants, connect them to homeownership if that's something that they desire. So we've been able to ensure that 80% of the homes that have been sold to date have been to BIPOC individuals with about an average income of about $44,000 a year. So we're excited that the neighborhoods that we're working in are also helping to create opportunities for Black and Brown folks as well, as create overall neighborhoods stability. Next slide. Some of the key, I think, takeaways that we have found in helping to sort of support this multi-pronged approach is really having a targeted strategy where you're helping existing homeowners improve their homes by connecting them with faith-based organizations or community housing organizations that have weatherization programs and other types of services that would be needed to help existing homeowners, but helping to create new affordable housing opportunities, whether that's rental or home ownership, and all of those opportunities and layering on of multiple strategies helps to increase neighborhood stability over time. So it's working with all of those partners at the table to understand sort of the metrics that you're going to be working with the community partners on to evaluate the success of your work over time, whether that's by a program or looking at sort of overall metrics for a community. I mentioned, the partners that we have been working with, understanding construction and housing and how to sort of navigate the building permitting process and things like that have been key. The Land Bank, the Housing Authority, NeighborWorks, Historic South being some of the partners that we've worked with in Toledo. Each one of those partners have a different kind of skill set and capacity, but all are able to bring different resources to the table that have been successful with moving our program forward. At LISC, we have been able, through partnerships with KeyBank and ProMedica and Mercy Bon Secours, and now owns Corning, attract additional investment to help support this program over time. And we feel that, as we're able to see the sales prices increase in each one of the neighborhoods, we'll get to a point where the subsidy that we're providing to each one of these homes to renovate them will also decrease. We just haven't quite gotten there yet. And that, our overall sort of goal with the program was trying to improve the neighborhood stability so that not only would the Core City program be attracting new homeowners, but that the existing residents in a community or landlords in a community would be able to take advantage of financial products through bank relationships that exist, but that really has been stymied by negative values and overall sort of decline. And so the overarching goal of the program is really to achieve that measure of success. Next slide. As we've continued to sort of understand what works in each neighborhood, how is it that we can select a home with partners that is marketable to individuals or families that are looking to make longer term commitments in the neighborhood. We've also recognized with COVID and supporting small business generally, even pre-COVID, that helping to increase the pool of contractors in our community is a significant need, and really making sure that those businesses that we're helping to connect are also reflective of the neighborhoods that we're working. So with our recent commitment from Owens Corning, we not only are continuing on with the Core City program, but more intentionally working with our business development organizations and the city, county, and others so that we can connect MBE and WBE contractors to the opportunities through the Core City program. Next slide. Yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you for that, Kim. Let's dive into some questions for you. So you spoke a lot about the importance of the partnerships in the Core City program. Could you talk a bit about how was LISC able to establish relationships with the funders and partners that are supporting the Core City program?
So when we launched our strategic framework for Toledo and sort of how would LISC as a CDFI and intermediary best position our tools working with other partners, we recognize the role that anchor institutions have to play in helping guide and support long-term leadership of these long-term strategies. And so in each one of our target neighborhoods that we're focused on, we've identified a key anchor either that was at the table already, but maybe investing more of it in a transactional way, to thinking about how they could share in that strategy and leadership, but thinking about the long-term transformation that working together, the anchors with community partners could play in achieving those overall goals. So we not only bring sort of the capacity building or technical assistance and financial sort of programs and products in a number of different ways, we also are able to play that bridge builder, matchmaker of all of the various components that would be successful to achieve those overall visions. And that's allowed us then to attract partners like KeyBank, ProMedica, Mercy Bon Secours, Owens Corning to the table, because we, through this multi-pronged approach, have been able to sort of eat away through these program initiatives at an overall vision for each of the communities that's greater than the sum of its parts.
That's really great. Thank you for sharing that. So you talk a bit about capacity building. So what type of capacity is needed from the community development partners that you're working with in Toledo?
So, I mean, definitely having a relationship with the community and understanding who will be interested, who is the market of families or individuals either that exist in the neighborhood already or might be interested in making the neighborhood their home. So having the relationships with communities or a network of partners that you're working through, I think, is key to be able to provide that understanding. But, you know, obviously managing construction projects, housing experience, being able to sort of braid multiple funding strategies is key. In some cases, we have partners, I mentioned the Land Bank and NeighborWorks, the Housing Authority, that are very experienced in doing that in a number of different ways. We've also used this as an opportunity to build the capacity of other community development organizations that may not have had that experience and help them sort of provide that technical assistance or capacity building to them. So we've been able to use, you know, the program to strengthen neighborhoods, but also to strengthen the capacity of those organizations that we need to help create homeownership opportunities that would stabilize neighborhoods. So
That's really great. Thank you. Thank you for that, Kim. I'm going to ask John and Rachel to kind of rejoin us and turn their cameras back on. We've got a few more minutes left and received a couple questions for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and, ask these questions, and feel free to, add a couple more to the chat, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. So the first one's for you, John. So OCFC has done a lot of work supporting the preservation of affordable housing. What are some ways that you're continuing to assist preservation-minded developers as you look to the future? I'm not hearing. Is anyone else able to hear John? No.
Sorry about that.
Okay, there we go.
How's that? My apologies.
Yeah, much better. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, so I think one thing is we look at the expansion of the 4% tax credit in terms of the 4% being fixed now. It's going to derive additional dollars that can go into preservation projects, specifically as we look towards bond deals. So we're looking at coming up with some new resources that would be early on funding both pre-development and acquisition to assist on the preservation effort, specifically towards projects that are at risk, as well as through OCFC, looking at some of just the general affordable housing stock and some new partnerships that we've created with non-traditional investors. So Nationwide Children's Hospital and CareSource as a couple, just to kind of call out that these are folks that are interested in the community, and how can we begin to leverage the community development dollars with some healthcare funding, healthcare initiatives, to know that we can provide better, safer, secure housing as part of our kind of a healthcare plan altogether. And I think Kim's done a lot of that with the work with ProMedica probably as well. But I think that's a whole nother initiative that can get leveraged into the preservation work. And then on top of that, the digital divide piece. So we know that a lot of older housing stock, particularly affordable housing, does not have kind of broad scale Wi-Fi internet access. And how can we begin to build that out within the preservation projects as well?
That's great, John. Thank you. We've got another question for you, Rachel. Do you establish a residency term requirement for participants in the homesteading program to help ensure longer-term neighborhood stabilization or commitment?
That's a great question. So for during the timeline for the land contracts, which is again 5 years, the families do need to live in the house and be homeowners. After we transfer ownership over to them, they can rent it, they could sell it, whatever. Again, keep in mind that the families that we're selling to are already living in the neighborhood, in rental properties, and this is such an amazing opportunity for them that. We've had a couple families that have already completed their land contract and could choose to sell, but these families have young kids in our neighborhood schools. We have some public schools in the neighborhood. We also have some very much loved parochial schools in the neighborhood that a lot of our families send their kids to. So folks are choosing houses near their kids' elementary school. So while they could choose to move because we don't have a long-term restriction on it, they have not done that up until this point. And again, one other distinction I wanted to remind folks of is that our goal for this program is not necessarily long-term affordability. It's helping these families build equity. And so that's why we don't have a long-term residency requirement on it, like where we would have if our goal was, long-term, affordability preservation in the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you, Rachel. I see we're approaching 2 o'clock, so I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to say thank you to Sheldon and to our panelists who provided such interesting work and insights into both long-term strategies and also how those strategies need to be adapted now to the new normal we're all living in. You'll see we're about to put a link in the chat to a survey questionnaire. We invite you to fill this out. It should take less than 1 minute to fill out. And if you do have the time, we appreciate the feedback to make sure that these webinars are useful to you. I also want to remind you that we're recording this and it will be on our website if you'd like to find it, along with past webinars in this series as well. And finally, I want to do a plug for our webinar for next week, which is entitled Rental Protection Legislation for Local Governments. We will be here at the same time, same place, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. So I invite you to join us. Thank you again to everyone who joined today, who submitted your questions, to all of our panelists, to Sheldon for moderating, and also to the Lincoln Institute for being our partner on this webinar series. So I hope we'll see you again next week. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.